Welcome to the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. I'm your host, Glenn Aline. With me today is Deputy Chief Fire Officer Henderson Patrick, who happens to be also the disaster coordinator for the Barbados Fire Service. Welcome, DCFO Patrick.
Good morning, Glenn. Thank you very much for inviting me to this podcast. It's a great opportunity to be able to talk to the general public and to give a sense of what we do in the fire service when it relates to disaster management.
Thank you, Deputy. It's indeed our pleasure to have you with us today on this podcast. And my first question, obviously, is what inspired you to pursue a career in the fire service, and what has led you to this role as a disaster manager?
Thanks again. It may seem as a cliche because everybody always say that they want to help the general public. But in my particular case, this was exactly true. I've always been concerned about vulnerable people, particularly children. So even coming up in my early years, even before joining the fire department, I wanted to be a pediatric nurse because I wanted to have some personal engagement with helping those persons who were considered to be most vulnerable. The opportunity did come, and I joined the fire department, and the sole and primary purpose was really to help persons, especially, as I've said already, those persons who were vulnerable, those persons who needed assistance when they had an emergency, and therefore the opportunity to help the public in a general way was one of the primary reasons for joining the fire department. And then secondly, there's obviously the caveat that once you're a member of the public service, you have a greater opportunity to be able to serve your own family, to have a level of security. And those were the things that inspired me to be part of the fire service.
And I know I speak for all when I say we are thankful for your service. For the benefit of our listeners, can you provide an overview of your role as disaster coordinator in the fire service and how it contributes to the department's preparedness?
Again, Mr. Allen, the general public is of the view that the fire service will always be there to serve. Whenever there's an emergency and you call the fire service, you will get that response. But internally, we have to ensure that the capacity is always there for the fire service to respond and to be able to meet the demands of the general public when that happens. And therefore, it is critical for us not only to give consideration to the needs and the demands of the general public, but we also have to look at our own position internally. Because if we are not able to respond because we have internal issues or we do not have capacity to be able to do that, then we're not going to be able to provide the service to the general public that they expect from us. And therefore, as the coordinator, it is to ensure that the fire service is always in a state of readiness, that the personnel who have to respond have the facilities, they have the equipment, the tools, they have the training, and whatever is required to ensure that they are ready to respond when the time comes. At the same time, we have to ensure that our own internal capacity is strong, that we have internal resilience. We have to ensure that we protect the infrastructures that we are in. We have to ensure that we protect the equipment. We have to ensure that all of the utilities that we use for communication and other part of the management structure, that those things are in place. And therefore, as the emergency coordinator, it is important that I have sight of all of those things and ensure that whatever is required on an annual basis, that it is put in place to ensure that we are protected, that we are resilient internally to be able to provide the service to the general public when they demand it.
I'm glad that you touched on that because from my own experience, many persons are not aware that we in the fire service too sometimes have our own internal challenges. And we're not ones to make excuses. when somebody calls, they expect a response from the fire department. So I'm glad that you brought some clarity to that point and to let the public know that we do sometimes have challenges, but we do our best to make sure that we are working at all times on ensuring that we have a level of efficiency when it comes to our ability to respond. Can you share some of the key responsibilities and challenges that you face in your day-to-day work as a disaster coordinator?
Again, it is important as coordinator to ensure that you have all of your team members on the same page. It is critical that those persons who work with you in the team understand what the objectives are, what the overall intent and purpose of your disaster management strategy is, to be able to fulfill and implement the strategy when the time comes. And it's a great responsibility to ensure that the other commanders, because while I am coordinator, it's a cascading approach where other persons take responsibility for other aspects of the strategy, and it is important that I am able to get those people to deliver and to be in a position to deliver when the time comes. I would say that in terms of the challenges, obviously finance would have to be the most critical one, and for the simple reason that things change so rapidly these days because of technology and because of the shifting activities that occur on a daily basis. A lot of it because of climate change and things of that nature. And you have to keep abreast of these things. The equipment that you were using 5-10 years ago to be able to mitigate a particular event is perhaps not the same type of tool that you can use today with the same and expect the same level of efficiency. But you're not always in a position to be able to go out there in a just-in-time manner and purchase the equipment or acquire the level of training to build your capacity for the persons or for the department to be able to satisfy those needs when they come. And so we say that finance is probably one of the key challenges that we would face, and it is a matter that we have to address, which we will, and perhaps a little later on in the discussion that we'll raise perhaps one or two ways that we are anticipating that we can address some of these financial issues to be able to get the type of equipment that you need to be able to provide the level of training for the individuals within the service that provide the service, so that when the public make the demand, we are able to respond in an efficient manner.
I'm sure that the issue of funding is one that affects many departments, so I can justly understand that the fire department as well would have challenges like any other organization in that area. Apart from the internal preparation of fire service personnel, can you describe the importance of community engagement and public education in disaster preparedness and how your role support these initiatives?
Right. So just a little while ago, we were making the point that finance is one of the key challenges that you face in circumstances like these. And one of the ways of resolving that particular issue is having a wider community engagement with a broader scope of stakeholders. And we're not only talking about stakeholders at the grassroots level, we will get to them because the community itself is important. If we are able to build up the community and make the community resilient, then it will have a positive impact on our responses when the time comes. But we also have to develop partnerships with people who have greater financial capacity than we have. That will help the fire service to achieve its objectives, but we will also create such a level of stakeholder engagement that those resources should be able to filter down to persons at the community level to be able to purchase simple tools that they might need, to be able to train persons at the community level to be able to build community resilience. And if we are able to get these things working together, then we will be able to build a type of product, a level of capacity that will help when the disaster does come. And the fire service itself is central to all of this because we have a responsibility to the community. We have a responsibility in a sense to the business community and those people who have assets that are greater than the ones that we possess. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the fire service, or part of its responsibility, to try to integrate these entities, to get them to work together, to develop a synergy between the fire department, the business community that has capacity, and the community itself, to be able to build a level of resistance and resilience that will help us when a disaster or we have the development of an emergency.
That is indeed quite a mouthful, Deputy, and I laud you because just listening to you, and I can see that your responsibility is a tremendous one. Not only are you looking at the internal level of preparedness from the fire department standpoint, but you're always still looking outward to the community preparedness and by the whole, the national level of preparedness. In your experience, what are some of the most common misconceptions or myths about disaster preparedness and response that you encounter among the public?
A very, very good question again, Mr. Allen. A lot of the times when you speak to people within the community, they always say to you that I have time. They always say to you that it will not affect me. And they always say to you that somebody will respond. But we have to recognize that in this time of global change and in this time where we have so much affecting our environment, that you can have a situation where you can have local flooding that will occur in just 15, 20 minutes. It's not a situation where you have pre-warning, where you have early notification. And therefore, at the community level, people cannot sit on laurels or cannot take the resolve that I have time. There must always be a high level of preparedness. There must always be a high level of expectation, especially in these times when climate change is impacting the way that we do business. So there must also be the understanding that whatever affects our community will affect the service providers. And therefore, it is possible that when you expect a response from the fire service or from the defense force or from the emergency ambulance service, that they may not be able to provide that service because whatever emergency or disaster is affecting the community may be impacting those service providers. So the misconception that you will always have an agency to respond to you is something that you have to pay attention to. And this is why we think that it is critical to build up capacity and resilience at the community level, that even if an external agency cannot respond immediately, that you have sufficient capacity within the community that they can help themselves until further help comes.
I support that comment wholeheartedly. I know that the fire department has been working with the DEOs and other community-based organizations with a view to enhancing that resilience. This is the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. We will be right back after this public service announcement.
your chip pan catches fire, don't panic. Just follow these instructions. 1. Turn off the heat. 2. Run a cloth under a tap and wring it out. 3. Cover the pan and then wait until it's cooled right down. Don't try and move the pan, and whatever you do, don't throw water over the fire. The effects can be devastating.
Welcome back to the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. I'm your host, Glenn Aline, and with me today is Deputy Chief Fire Officer Henderson Patrick, who is also the Disaster Coordinator for the Barbados Fire Service. Welcome back, Deputy.
Thank you.
When disaster strikes, communication is critical. Could you explain the communication strategies and tools your team relies on to coordinate response efforts and keep the public informed?
Thanks again, Mr. Allen. From an internal perspective, we have to ensure, first of all, that we have the mechanisms, the tools to be able to communicate with each other. And we are paying special attention these days to our VHF radio strategy, trying to build up capacity throughout the entire island so that wherever we are, we can have that linkage. We've also been investing in the Cisco Java technology, which assists us, when we have down telephone communication and things of that nature. So we're using available technology today to assist us in raising our level of communication. But aside from that, having this tool and being able to communicate with the general public, which is critical, is another thing. And therefore, we are also using the social media platform to be able to notify people, to be able to communicate with them, to be able to share information. And we're even looking at the approach where we can have technology available for persons with disabilities to be able to communicate with the fire department, because this is an area that is really lacking these days. And you have persons with disabilities. Sometimes they live alone. Sometimes they are affected in a negative way by an emergency, and they are unable to communicate. And we're looking at strategies using various applications and so on to be able to communicate with individuals who might be in those kind of dire straits. So communication is really important. Accessing the technology, utilizing it is important. And the fire service is definitely on the forefront in utilizing these facilities.
I'm glad you made mention of the disabled community, because we have been doing some work with them, and I am personally aware of some of the challenges that relate to the aspects of communication and the lack thereof that prevents them from being able to effectively report and communicate their emergencies to the services. So it's pleasing to hear and to let the public know that we are working in that regard to have seamless communication strategies going forward that would make provision for our disabled community. Technology is constantly evolving. How has technology impacted the way that you and your team plan for the fire service ability to respond to disasters? And what emerging technologies do you see as particularly promising for future disaster coordination efforts?
Again, Mr. Allen, the technology is so critical to communication. Even simple things like WhatsApp. We are able to communicate with officers. We're able to send information. Let's say, for instance, we had a pending weather system. We can communicate with the officers in this way so that they can put things in place within their station area. They can get resources that they might need in a timely fashion and things of that nature. So we're using that technology to assist. A lot of the times in the past, you use paper-based activities. You would have a fax machine, and the information will come in by fax, and sometimes it stays there and nobody's aware that it came in and things of that nature, and there's a breakdown, there's a gap that's developed. Today, because of the communication that is available and the technology that is available, the applications that you can use for early notification and for early warning are so readily accessible that you can share information in a timely manner with those persons who are most affected by it and who need it and who will need that information to be able to make a decision. The other thing that we're using and that we're focusing on in terms of the technology is utilizing data to be able to help make decisions and to help in our planning. We've worked with the University of the West Indies and other local NGOs to analyze data to help us to understand rainfall patterns, to help us to understand water conditions, to help us to understand fire conditions, to help us to appreciate where we have greater level of incidents and things of that nature, to help us to understand the demographics of the country and so on, so that we can plan better for events that might occur within these vicinities. So we're using data analysis and to understand trends, so that we can better plan. We can pre-plan. We can be upfront before decision as it relates to certain activities, where the frequency of these activities occur. And in the past, we have been able to focus strategies and attention on these areas in helping the community to build up capacity even before an event may occur, just to prepare them both physically and in terms of training and equipment and knowledge, so that when something does occur, there is a better response to it, a better application of the knowledge that they have gained to these circumstances when they do arise.
I'm glad that you made mention of some of the strategies that you are utilizing, because quite often we don't upfront share what we're doing with the public, and the public is left to make their own perceptions that we're not doing anything or we're still behind. So it's quite comforting that today you've shared a lot of what is happening behind the scenes, and now they are aware that a lot of work is going on very quietly, but a lot of work is going on behind the scenes within the fire service. We are working with a number of stakeholders to actually move forward in a most advantageous way to better be able to mitigate and also pre-plan for emergencies and disasters. So this is indeed comforting, and I'm sure that the public will take note of the information that is shared today. In recent years, there has been significant challenges regarding climate change and its impact on disasters. How does the fire department adapt and plan for the changing landscape of disasters due to climate-related factors?
Well, one of the things that I want to say in relation to the challenges is that people have a skewed opinion about climate change. Some people do not believe it. They do not trust the science. They don't pay attention to what persons are saying about the changes that are being impacted or that are coming about, or these factors that are developing, global warming, sea rise, sea temperatures in the ocean, and various other factors that are resulting from climate change. And therefore, it is difficult to get people to buy in to many of the structures that will be put in place to help with disasters when they do occur. There are many early warning systems, there are monitoring systems that are being put in place to be able to help people to better respond. We have earthquake early warning devices, and there's several other technology factors that are placed out there for the benefit of the general public. Now, the fire service have to pay attention to these things because, again, as we've said before, it lends to our level of preparation, decision making, what type of equipment that we purchase. We have even reached out in recent times to procure equipment that can tell you if a person is under rubble as a result of earthquake or building collapse and so on. If we pay attention to what is happening in the region and we pay attention to the science and to those persons who monitor and give information, it helps us to better pre-plan. It helps us to better look at the equipment that we might need to be able to respond to the incidents that might occur from these types of events. And so the fire service, again, pay attention to training. You have to know what is going on and you have to build the capacity that is required for people to respond. We have to realize that things are changing and what knowledge we had resident years ago that was useful in its zone, in its time, will certainly require a lot more to be able to properly mitigate circumstances when they do arise today.
Yes, indeed. There is that back and forth push regarding climate change, but despite that, we have to look at what is happening right in front of us. Whether or not we believe in climate change, the reality is we have reports from all over the world, extensive flooding, extensive heat waves, raging wildfires, and catastrophic hurricanes, catastrophic Category 5 hurricanes occurring quite frequently. So we can't ignore what is happening in front of our very eyes, whether or not we believe in climate change. So I for one, wouldn't debate whether climate change exists or not, but I know what I see in front of me every day. What advice would you offer for individuals and communities looking to enhance their disaster preparedness and resilience? And how can they collaborate with the fire service?
Yes, again, community resilience, as we have said on more than one occasion already, is really critical. It is getting the community to understand what is happening in the environment. It is getting people to understand that the concept of climate change and its impact on communities is real. And it is important to get the community to do something about it before something happens. We have situations where there are communities in Barbados that with just a small amount of rainfall, those communities become flooded out. So what I'm saying to the communities, to those communities and to other communities, is that things like simply cleaning your storm drains, simply cleaning the environment around you, the wells that might be catchment areas for the water, the runoff water. All of these are things that we can do long before an event occurs. We have very, very, very hot days these days, and while in the past we may have thought that it was impossible for spontaneous combustion to occur, it is very possible today with the types of temperatures that we are having, where you have open pastures and you have a significant amount of vegetation around your home, that you can have some level of combustion occurring that may impact you as an individual. So the point that I'm making here is that before something like that happens, and given the fact that we have these types of temperatures, clean around your home. Ensure that there is a level of debushing around you, that if something does happen, it will not impinge on your property. tall trees. Once you have a system developing and it can develop rapidly, we just had a system that less than 24 hours ago, it was a category 2. And in the last reporting, it is a category 5. So within a short space of time, you can have systems developing. And if you have infrastructure around you, or if you have things around you that may impact your property and your private life, then you have to address these things way before those incidents occur, because sometimes they can occur very quickly.
Yes, indeed. I was amazed at the speed in which Hurricane Lee moved yesterday from being a Category 2 to last night in the 11 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center to Category 5. That is a phenomenal feat in a hurricane, and we must pay attention, like you said, to what is happening around us. And despite our personal beliefs, we have to look at our level of preparedness, both at the personal level with your family, but then also at the community level, and then also at the national level. Finally, looking ahead, what trends or developments do you envision in the field of disaster coordination, and how do you see the role of the fire service evolving in response to these changes?
Again, Mr. Allen, we have to recognize that the emergencies that we are, or the disasters that are developing these days, are not your traditional hurricanes and so on that we are accustomed to. The emergencies and the disasters that are developing today are widespread. And therefore, we have to have a broader perspective on managing disasters. We have to have a broader aspect on our risk reduction approach and as it relates to the community, and even our own internal strategies. What we have not paid a lot of attention to in the past is things like pandemics. And in the recent past, and even on us today, is still the COVID-19 pandemic. And that requires a level of response, a level of approach that is probably quite different from how we would respond to a hurricane or an earthquake, because it impacts every aspect of your operation. It impacts your personnel, it impacts the level of service delivery, it impacts your finances, because you have to look for resources to upgrade, and also to ensure that there is a level of safety available within your local jurisdiction, and also when you're responding out of jurisdiction. So that was just one exposure that we had. Perhaps going forward, we can look forward to similar to other pandemics, and we have to be prepared, and we have to learn from what we have just gone through to prepare for what is ahead of us. What pandemics and what disasters do, however, is develop a need for humanitarian assistance. People will be impacted by these disasters. Some people will lose their homes. It will affect our social construct. It will affect our economic situation. And when people are found in these conditions, they will resort to almost anything to get by. We have learned of situations in Barbados where people use derelict homes, and they go and they light fires, they put a lot of old things, a lot of old clothes and so on, and you still have infrastructure, you still have communities that are within the jurisdiction of these derelict facilities. And therefore, if these people, because of their social condition or their economic condition, find themselves in these situations, it is going to impact the resources of the fire service. It is going to impact the fire service, the resources of the community, especially if fire breaks out or if there is some other situation that develop as a result of these people being found in these conditions. So I'm saying that perhaps there are two things: the pandemics and how we look at rendering humanitarian assistance going forward. That we will have to pay attention to these things as a department, and whatever we can do to get people out of these conditions, or to assist them, or to assist other agencies in creating better environmental conditions and better social conditions for these people, it will be to the benefit of the fire service going forward. Because if we do not have to respond to those conditions, it is a saving for the fire department, but it is also a benefit to the community in which these persons live and the communities that we serve.
I do share your comments on the fact that our traditional incidents have changed and they continue to evolve, because now we are in the climate where we have hazmat incidents occurring a lot more frequently. We have all types of chemicals and products being used that have the potential to cause calamity. And of course, wherever there is misuse of such products, or neglect for that matter, we can have situations developing. So I do share your views that the traditional responses from the fire department is evolving, and we're seeing new challenges going forward. The COVID-19 pandemic has opened our eyes to the potential of what could happen, and it has been a learning curve for us here in Barbados, and of course, the world. Going forward, however, we have a template now, a basic template by which we can function for any future pandemics coming, because there was a lot of preparation put in place for the COVID-19, and we can learn on the best practices that occurred from that pandemic. Deputy, you've shared a lot today, and I want to thank you for bringing to the public's attention a lot of the developments taking place in the fire department, and of course what is happening behind the scenes in terms of disaster coordination, preparation, and our internal strategies for building our capacity to respond and assist the public when the need arises. I thank you, sir, for taking the time to join this podcast today. We look forward to having you back sometime in the future. I want to wish you the very best as you continue to serve the good people of Barbados and, of course, the Caribbean, because I am aware that you also function at that level as well. We thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali.
This is the Bonfire Chat, the podcast of the Bajan Firefighters Network. We want to thank you for joining us on this episode. Please do so again soon. Have a fantastic day. God bless.